So, my apologies for just stepping in. I suppose I should use this podium. But Neil Ellis is hosting, Bishop Neil Ellis, forgive me, is hosting the students from his home island of Bimini to a review of the museum and library which he's just opened about his life. And I promised to be there at 2:30, and that ran a little bit over. So I anticipated that things would not go precisely on time. But this afternoon actually belongs to Mrs. Stevenson, who was the wife and widow of my late boss, friend and mentor, named Cyril Stevenson, who I met in 1970 at my first job as a messenger at what was then called Government Information Services, which was a part of an agency called the Bahamas Tourist News Bureau, which operated out of Nassau Court, which is a building, I think it still exists, opposite the now British Colonial Hotel at the back. And it's only in retrospect that I appreciate and appreciated now the person that I was actually interacting with. You tend, when you are, I'll put it this way, of tender years, to take a lot of things for granted, one of which is that time began the day you were born, and nothing happened before you got here. But Cyril Stevenson was a co-founder of the Progressive Liberal Party and was elected to the House of Assembly in 1956 as one of the members of the Magnificent Six. The Progressive Liberal Party, you may or may not know, is the first political party in the country that survived as first an opposition party and then as the government. And what H.M. Taylor says is that in 1953, Cyril Stevenson had been sent by the Nassau Guardian, I believe it was, to London to cover the coronation of Elizabeth II, who died last year. And on their way back, he and Bill Cartwright, who was then the Member of Parliament for Cat Island, on their way back from the coronation, stopped in Jamaica because they had this idea that they needed to form a political party in the Bahamas, and they wanted to find out what the Jamaican experience was. So they stopped in Jamaica, had talks with the then JLP and the PNP, and then they came back to Nassau, and the three of them met, H.M. Taylor, Cyril Stevenson, and Bill Cartwright, and they came up with this idea of something called the Progressive Liberal Party. Two of them were Roman Catholics. And if you read the original platform of the Progressive Liberal Party, it reads almost like a Catholic social treatise because it adopted many of the principles of Roman Catholic teaching. And that found its way into the public policy and social policy of the Bahamas. Bill Cartwright lost his seat in '56. H.M. Taylor lost his seat. He was then the Member of Parliament for Long Island, and he lost his seat in '56. And 6 members joined became PLP members and formed the opposition to the then government, and a couple of years later, 1958, the United Bahamian Party. They'd basically been operating as a party anyway, but they formed themselves into a party in 1958. And as you know, there are a whole lot of social changes which are taking place in the country at this time. The riots had taken place in 1942. There was a commission of inquiry which said that the reason for the riots had to do with the social disequilibrium which existed in the society, and there needed to be legislative and constitutional change. And at this time, Harold Munnings, around the same time, had returned home, and he'd married June Stevenson, who he met in London, and history says she gave shelter to himself and many other Bahamians, and I'm going to use the word black Bahamians, who were in London and aspiring to bring about change in their home country. Amongst them was Lyndon Pindling. So he gets back in 1953, and he joins the Progressive Liberal Party. There's a photograph which is taken at their first convention. I'm aware of that. She was a photographer. And there are two photographs which are now iconic, I think. One is the photograph of the first convention in the Aurora Hall, which the Aurora Hall still exists today. It's up at the top of the steps. The steps there just below East Hill Street. Yeah. So that took place, and that photograph is etched in history of the Bahamas. And then the photograph of the 6 members of Parliament, who were the first members of the PLP. So Sammy Isaacs, Cyril Stevenson, Clarence Bain, Milo Butler, Randall Fox. We missed out one. Lyndon Pindling, yeah. So, yeah, miss him out. So, Mrs. Stevenson is a recorder of history. And we have those photographs today because she was there. But like other women, like my Uncle Basil Johnson was married to Eunice, who he was an RAF pilot during the war, and he met an English woman, married, brought her back home. Harold brought Mrs. Stevenson back to the Bahamas, and she met Cyril, and Michael and Clark came along. But they could not, Roy Bowe married an English woman, Cecil Wallace Whitfield married an English woman, Arthur Hanna married an English woman. And all of them came into a country that was deeply segregated and in which discrimination was rampant and rife. There's a lot of rewriting or attempt to rewrite history now, but that was the way it was. There's a prominent doctor, Johnny Rogers is his son today. I think Rogers, he was once the chair of the council here, right? Right. His father was a prominent doctor in the 1950s and got thrown out of the Savoy Theater in fisticuffs by Charlie Bethel, who was the owner of the Savoy. It's the wrong color. You know you're not supposed to be in here. Get out. And they threw him out. That's the Bahamas in the 1950s. And we as black boys were scared to walk in various neighborhoods that were basically what we call Conky Joe neighborhoods. You just couldn't go because you're not supposed to be there. So that's the Bahamas, and that changed dramatically in 1967. Dramatically. And well, I mentioned Mrs. Stevenson as the recorder of that history, but also one of the progenitors of the change, because they brought with them to this country, and which is why it's a country of immigrants. People keep arguing about people coming here and all the rest of it, but it's a country of immigrants. And the country is stronger because of that immigration. So they brought these ideas of equality, fraternity, liberty, and that's what they inculcated, helped to inculcate in our society. And Cyril could not have done what he did if June wasn't at his side and providing a place of refuge a home and a family which inspires men to do the things which they have to do or want to do. Because politics is not easy. It's unforgiving. You are broke most of the time. And your family, it's usually the wife who has to carry the cost of the battle. And it makes a difference when you're able to go home and someone says to you, don't worry, you do what you have to do and we'll make it. That's important. Can't happen unless that takes place. And so that's why, in part, she's a great woman in her own right. I saw a very moving tribute written by her granddaughter to the press, which I think expresses it more than we could ever do. But she's a great woman in her own right. And today it's only fitting, with Michael present, and to say to Clark and Lindy, I think Richard's passed away, that she was a great woman and lived a long and fruitful life. And for that, our country is grateful. And on behalf of the civic authorities, and then on my own behalf, I want to extend condolences to Mike on the passing of his mother, who always asked about me all the time, because she knew that Cyril and I was 17 when I met him, and it was quite a time. I now know why old men tell the stories they tell younger men when they meet them. Because being an old man myself, I now have the same preoccupations, which I will not share. But it was just great listening to all these stories. And his favorite, he would take in the fashion of the day. Ginseng was the popular thing to take, and he was every day taking his ginseng. Right? Don't know what it does. I haven't tried ginseng yet. But he was really. We had a great time, and I really enjoyed my time with him. And on Independence Night, he was actually standing next to me when the flag went down. And he said to me, I could never, they just never thought that this was possible. And here we are, 51 years later. It is not only possible, but we're going to do bigger and better. So, Mrs. Stevenson, go to God with our blessings, and bless her, the repose of her soul, and bless you all, the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. Thank you.